Coach, could you talk about how you thought Darius Hanks and the rest of the punt return group handled the rugby-style punts that you saw from Ole Miss?
Well, we didn't make a lot of positive yards, you know, but I think when you put two guys back there, it's not what you gain necessarily in terms of on the plus side, but what did you not lose? Because we counted almost over 20 yards a kick in the rugby style, hitting the ground and rolling in field position, 20-plus yards per kick, with people's inability to get the ball fielded. And at least what we did, and the reason we put Hanks back there, because he's a baseball player, and you guys know I'm, you know, sort of favor baseball players and their judgment of how to play shortstop and all that kind of stuff. Not that there's any reflection here, but that he would make good judgments and decisions about being able to play the hops and play the ball and all that kind of stuff, and he did that. So we saved a lot of field position by being able to get the ball fielded. Even though we'd only had, you know, what, 12, 13 yards in positive returns, we even had some opportunities that we could have had more yardage, but we saved a lot. So I was pleased with that part of what we did in a game.
Just as a quick follow-up, there were a couple of times against Florida when you saw that where it seemed like the ball nearly inadvertently hit one of your men in the back. Is there anything you can do as a coach other than selling out for the block to minimize that risk?
Oh, well, we signal on the back end. You know, the returner tries to signal to the guys running down the field who have their back to the ball to get out of the way. You know, I disagree with the rule change that used to be able to make that signal and still advance the ball. Now if you make that signal, you can't advance the ball because it can't be verbal. It has to be some kind of a hand signal, and I don't really agree with that. I mean, a fair catch is a fair catch. Any other signal is the defensive guys, the people covering the kick, ought to go cover the kick.
Coach, Nick Gentry has had a successful season thus far. Can you talk about the contributions he's made on defense?
Well, Nick really gives us, you know, a real presence inside and pass rush. He's very quick and explosive, and for the 15 to 20 plays that he plays in about every game, his production has been, you know, really, really good. And I think he complements the other players that we have extremely well. The things that he does well, some of our other guys don't do quite as well. And I think, you know, those kinds of differences is what helps us be able to put together, you know, 18 or 20 guys that play a lot and contribute a lot on defense in different situations in the game, and they complement each other well. But he has done a really, really good job of giving us a presence inside and pass rush. And, you know, some people think, well, he's not big enough to do that, but his quickness and explosive power has been a real asset for us.
Coach, I want to talk to you about developing your players here with your system. I'm sure that most you plan to have 4 years with that player, sometimes 5, depending on red shirt. So many of your players have been going early. Is that beginning to make an impact on the way you develop and use players in your system here?
Well, you know, I think that the whole, let's start with the whole idea of redshirting. We still use the same philosophy. We don't premeditate redshirting anybody. We give everybody an opportunity to come in and play. And we've had probably an average of 8 freshmen early on, more than that have been able to contribute and play in some role on every team. And those guys have been able to do that because they're ready to contribute in some way to the team. We've had quite a few freshmen that have started here, but we have a lot of guys who contribute in a role. And we have to make a decision early on whether a guy should or shouldn't play. But I think in this era, we would be much better off just to say a guy has 5 years to play in terms of player development. Because right now, when you redshirt a guy as a freshman, you don't really know that he'll ever be here in a 5th year. You know, our graduation rate has gone way up So most of our guys graduate in 3.5 or 4 years. So they have to choose to go to graduate school to stay here for a 5th year in most cases. So doesn't need to stay here for school. You know, a lot of guys look to their future in terms of, can I play in the NFL? Will I come out in 3 years, 4 years? So, you know, I think if you just said everybody's got 5 years to play, and this was something that was voted on a few years back, it would be a little better in terms of player development. Like, we're not playing a few guys this year that I would have liked to played some, but I don't think they would have played enough to enhance their development because I don't think their role would have been significant enough. Well, if we had the other rule, you could play those guys and not worry about it. So, and I'll be honest, I wasn't one of the guys that was necessarily for that rule when it came up, but I think the whole dynamic of college football has changed now. More guys want to come at mid-year. They want to get started sooner. They want to get finished sooner. And, you know, so it's more difficult in terms of managing players' development. And some of these guys that we're not playing this year, they may not be here 5 years from now for their 5th year. But we've tried to do it based on, is this guy ready to play from a physical and emotional standpoint and a maturity standpoint? And if he's going to play enough that's going to enhance his development, we're certainly going to play him. And we try to coach them all. But the most difficult thing with the freshmen is if they're not going to play, do they have the maturity to go practice every day to make the improvement so it is beneficial, you know, for them. That's the most difficult thing.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, thank you. Sorry for kind of getting a little bit sideways with you all today, but I'm not mad at anybody. This is a big game for me.